And I just wanted to start off talking to you about what is a personal brand and why is that important to your career?
It's a great question, and I think some people have a misconception or maybe sort of an ick feeling because it sounds like we're trying to turn people into products, which is not true. I think
Right.
the best way to define personal brand is it's your professional reputation. That's all it is. Actually, really your personal and professional reputation, but probably in our context, it will mostly be professional. And it was a term invented by Tom Peters, who's a business guru, and he invented the term way back in 1997, which is right around when I was starting my career. So it was a very hot term. But if anyone's uncomfortable, just think about it as your reputation. What do people say about you? What do you want them to say about you in a professional context?
Right. So how do you go about building your brand?
So I think it's really important, and you'll notice this from my book, that you have to think about it in two parts, which is your online brand, your LinkedIn profile, things that you say or photos that you share on social media, and also your in-person, how you dress, how you present yourself, how you speak, and even things like the emails that you send, the message on your voicemail, even if you hate voicemail, the business card that you give away. Any touch point or interaction that somebody has with you is an opportunity to build your personal brand. So you really want to think holistically that even if you're fantastic in person, but you have sort of a halfway done LinkedIn profile, you don't really have a strong personal brand. You have to think about every interaction as a place somebody might meet you and might have a reputation building moment with you.
Right, because it's a total package.
Yes.
And I love this idea that you talked about in your book about think not only what you want to do, but who you want to be. Because I think often, even when working with students, they have a vague idea what they want to do. They may not know exactly what that is, but I think always people know who they want to be.
Absolutely. And I agree, especially as a student, you might not know where you want your career to go. And the whole reason I got into my business and started it is because I didn't know what I wanted to do,
Hmm.
but I knew that I wanted to be professional, that I liked public speaking and wanted to be known for that, that I was a good writer, that I wanted to build my contacts and be the kind of person who dressed professionally, who was generous in my networking and
Right.
helping other people. So even if you're undecided, or have a lot of different interests, you can still build a brand as somebody who people like, who they trust, who they want to do business with, who they think of as intelligent and helpful and kind and smart and professional. So I think it's a great way for students to think about this. Your brand is not just what you do, it's how you do it.
Right. And when you were talking about that, I think you pulled out like a lot of your strengths. Like these are the things that I love to do. These are the things that I do well. And if you start thinking in those terms, how can I use this to build a brand? So you're already using what you have. It's not like you have to go create this new persona.
Yeah, and in today's world, you're likely to have multiple careers anyway.
Hmm.
So if people know things about you, certainly it's part of my brand that I have some expertise in LinkedIn or that I'm a professional speaker, but I also hope it's that I am responsive to people's emails, that I am helpful when somebody asks for a connection. So even as you kind of solidify what you want, those characteristics are going to be important as well. And, if you build yourself up with your brand being, I'm a scientist and all I do is science, what if you change your mind? You've
Yeah,
kind of painted yourself into a corner.
right.
And I know a lot of students want to keep their options open. So branding is a way to sort of broaden what you do as well.
Yeah, and also when you talk about whether or not you intentionally set out to build a brand, you have a brand.
So I definitely get some pushback on this topic, as I've kind of hinted at,
Hmm.
of, oh, I don't have a brand. I don't want a brand. You have a brand. You have a reputation from your peers, your classmates, your professors, your friends. So one of the ways you can gauge that is, and I do this sometimes in the room, and I might do this when I'm visiting Zicklin, is how would other people describe you? If you asked five people who know you well to list 3 or 5 words, what would they say about you? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What do they think of you for? And that's your brand.
Right.
And so the question is, are you happy with those answers, or would you prefer they said something else? And if you would prefer they said something else, what are you going to do to make sure that they know you for other things?
So you actually do recommend in the book as well asking people, um, what words would they use to describe you?
And that's what career services is great for because
Hmm.
it's kind of an unbiased opinion. But friends, family, mentors are great for this, professors, classmates. If you're in a club or a business fraternity or any kind of organization where you know people in any sort of a professional way, even among your friends or people you play soccer with on the weekends, they're going to think of you as, oh, you're the leader or you're the social one or you're the quiet one. So you have a reputation, and most people kind of know what it is, but you want to confirm whether what people say about you is what you think they're going to say.
Yeah, so just ask. I think people are always willing to, if there are people that you trust, just ask them and get their feedback.
And you can sort of stack the deck and say, can you say some positive things about me? You know, you don't want to open the
Right.
floodgates that you might get negative criticism. But I think it's really important, especially, I think it's also a way to kind of get over concerns. I get a lot of international students, for instance, who think that they're too shy or
Mhm.
that their English isn't good or that they
Yes.
don't know how to network. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe you're too hard on yourself. So I often find people are very critical of themselves, and what you hear from others is often a lot more positive than what you might suggest or
Yes.
guess about yourself.
I fully agree. And in the book, you actually mentioned four elements of the personal brand. The one I like a lot is authenticity, but
Okay.
you talked about visibility. You
Yeah,
talked about,
authenticity usually be last. Yeah, visibility.
yeah, you talked about differentiation, consistency, and authenticity. So what's visibility?
You're right. Authenticity really should come first, but we'll get to that. Visibility is, are you visible in the places that your prospects are looking? And this is very much about your professional career. So visibility means, are you on the social networks where people are looking? Primarily for business school students, that would be LinkedIn. So if somebody searches for you, do you have a professional profile, a professional photograph? If you are in an industry, let's say fashion, they would probably look for you on Instagram. So you kind of want to know where online people in your field would be looking. When it comes to in person, are you showing up at professional networking events? Are you visible at job fairs or company information sessions if the companies that you want to work for are there? So if you say, my whole life I've dreamed of being an investment banker, but 3 investment banks are on campus and you're not showing up to their sessions, there's a disconnect
Right.
there with your
Mhm.
brand. So visibility is literally showing up online and in person. Consistency is about doing that on a regular basis. Are you showing up regularly? I've had recruiters say to me, it's not the person who applies to the job that I hire, it's the person who shows up during orientation at my dinner and then comes to see me at the job fair and then notices that I'm on campus and has coffee with me and then applies for the
Yes.
job.
Hmm.
That's kind of a combination, I think, of visibility and consistency. And are you consistent from in person to online and back again? So if I meet you and you're really impressive, if you send me an email and it's full of typos, there's a disconnect.
Yes.
So that consistency online, in person, and then showing up. Differentiation is really about that personal brand again. If I have 10 job candidates sitting in front of me, what makes you unique? Why should I hire
Yeah.
you?
Hmm.
And I think a lot of candidates expect that the recruiter or the employer will figure that out about you. Oh, Lindsay, oh yeah, she'd be good at this. But it's actually the opposite. You need to explain to them what makes you different, why you're the perfect fit for this job. And that can be really hard in college or business school because everybody's smart and everybody's talented.
Right.
What are you especially good at? And that's where understanding your personal brand comes in. For instance, I'm really good at finance, but so are a dozen other people, but I'm really good at the combination of finance and talking to people about it in a very personal way. Something that makes you unique. And the best thing you can do is to combine what makes you unique with what you think makes that company that you're applying for unique and why that's a really good match for each other. On your resume and LinkedIn, differentiation comes out in the form of keywords. What do I see on your resume that I might not see on other people's? And that's something to really give a lot of thought to. And finally, the first one you
Yeah.
mentioned, which is the most important,
Yeah. Hmm.
is authenticity. I don't want anyone to think that building a brand is about being fake or saying, wow, I really think the world wants people who like big data today, so I'm going to get into big data. You have
Right.
to genuinely have a skill, have a passion, know about it. And I think people are very attracted to young people in particular who are really passionate about what they're doing, who authentically love it. So I don't think there's any value in faking something. Now, being authentic doesn't mean that if you feel authentic in sweatpants that you should show up
Right.
for a job interview in sweatpants. So you want to be professional in your authenticity. But I think being very true to yourself and true to what you want and are very good at, and not trying to say, well, the world seems to want a lot of accountants now, I'm going to be an accountant. You do want to have some affinity for what it is you're looking for. So authenticity is really, really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of times, even when I do mock interviews with students and I ask them, just tell me about yourself, that's so hard for students. And it's hard for them, I think, to differentiate themselves from other students because if I see five students, usually four out of five of them, I hear exactly the same answer. I'm a second year MS and accounting student. So how do you talked about introduction as well in the book. So how do you differentiate yourself in that introduction?
So I think you hit on the hardest question in the job search process, which is tell me about yourself. That is so open-ended and so hard because that's a big question.
Yes.
So I think what you want to think about is what are the stories or decisions or moments that define you. So it might be, I want to be an accountant because my dad and my grandfather were both accountants. That's a simple fact, but it's very memorable. Or I was always the kid who loved math. I ran a little, I don't know, math class with my friends on the weekends, and that was exciting to me. Or something that tells me why. Why accounting? Why numbers? Why business? A family story, something about what you loved in school, your favorite class, or how you chose your major, or a job that you had, or anything that answers that question is so powerful. And if you can tell it in the form of a story that's memorable, I will always then remember you as, oh, you're the one where accounting runs in your family. Something that helps me understand.
Right. And I think another great topic that you have in that section was living your values and making decisions accordingly, even the words you use. So let's talk a little bit about that because I think sometimes that can get lost. And, when students, they feel that they have to follow the pack as opposed to just being, again, like going back to that authenticity, like just being true to myself. So how do you live your values?
So I think you have to get clear on what they are. And, it can just be something as easy as I care about my family, or I care about the world, or I care about, growing businesses. I'm really passionate about helping the economy. I'm really passionate about justice. What are some of the big things that you would donate your money to? Or what are the causes that you have volunteered for? Or anything, maybe it's honesty. I really like accounting because I think it's important for people to be very cautious with their money. And I like having the job of making sure that everything adds up.
Right.
Something that brings your values in, I think is very valuable. And on the other hand, so it can sort of be a career choice. So I know I really like to help people with what I've struggled with, and I like to be authenticity is very important to me. So I often say, I want to tell you all the mistakes I made so you don't make them. That's sort of a core tenet of what I do, but it also helps you pick the right company. So you can say to, maybe you're applying to an accounting firm, and a lot of them are very similar. But if somebody says, well, why this accounting firm? You can say, well, I know that you have a really strong green environmental initiative, and that's very important to me. I volunteer for several environmental organizations, and I think we'd be a good fit. Sometimes values can align you with the values or the mission of a company, maybe not just in the day-to-day job, but in who they are. Or I believe that we need a lot of global understanding. I'm from another country. I've moved here. I want to work for a global firm to help be part of that solution. It also helps you decide where you don't want to work.
Right.
So, if you walk into an interview and all they're talking about is money and you really care about helping people, you might sort of get this feeling of like, I don't think I'm a good fit here. Trust that gut feeling. If something feels like you would be way too much of an outsider, or I've often said people get imposter syndrome because they don't think they're qualified, but sometimes you get imposter syndrome because you don't like it and
Yeah.
it doesn't feel comfortable. It's okay to not choose a job because you don't feel like that would be the right fit for you. So trust your gut on your values and the environment you're going to work in, not just in terms of finding the right fit. It can go either way.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point because I remember my first job in the corporate world. I always felt I had to leave myself at home And then I go
Yeah,
into work and I just didn't feel like myself. And that should have been an indicator that maybe this is not a right fit. But I kept going. Thought maybe something is wrong with me. I need to like, yeah.
it's
So I
true.
think trusting your gut is so important.
Yes.
In terms of networking and personal brand, how do you ensure that you are maintaining your personal brand when you're out there networking and meeting people?
So I think it can be hard because networking sometimes feels really uncomfortable for a lot of people. And that's why I think you should really think of networking as starting with people you know and building very slowly from there, particularly with students. I'm not a big fan of sort of throwing yourself into a situation where you don't know anybody. Bring a friend or go to a club where you know a lot of club, meaning like a student club where you know a lot of people, or go to a career services event where you know everybody is affiliated with the university. You know, you don't have to walk into a room full of strangers because then nobody's really
Yeah.
authentic. It's
Hmm.
too scary.
Exactly.
So I think the best way to, and you might do that in 20 years and feel comfortable, but for most people, that's very inauthentic. So start in places where you feel comfortable. I'm a huge fan of bringing a friend if necessary who will sort of introduce you, or you can talk to people together and then you have a little bit of a helper next to you. Maybe reach out to people online like LinkedIn before you meet them in person and say, hey, I'm coming to your event. I'm really looking forward to it. I'll come up and say hi. And then you have some information. But I think the last way to always feel comfortable in a networking situation is you've got to know your stuff. I talk a lot about research in my book, and I'll talk a lot about it at my presentation coming up, which is if you're well read on your industry and you're well read about current events and the news, you're always going to have things that you genuinely know about to bring up in conversation. So the analogy I give, it's like studying for a test. If you walk in knowing you've prepared, you feel very comfortable
Yes.
taking that test because you've studied. So I think the more educated you are about your industry or about business or about the world, whatever it is that you think tends to come up in your environment where you're networking, the more prepared you are, the more comfortable you'll often feel. And when you're comfortable, you're authentic.
Yes, and I love the tip of also taking someone with you because I know especially for introverts, it's so hard for you to go to a networking event if you don't know anyone and you're just meeting people for the first time. And the other big topic regarding personal branding is online. When you're online, when you're on social media, how do you ensure that you're maintaining that brand that you want to create?
I think research, again, is a really big piece. So make sure that you're educated before you post articles about things or comment on somebody else's tweets or whatever it is that you're going to do. I also think online, remember that everything you say or write is part of this brand that you're building. So you want to be you, but a nicely professional, well-spoken, grammatically correct version of you for the most
Yes.
part. So I think you want to double check everything that you say, make sure that it's representing you well. I think you want to remember to be polite. So please and thank you go a
Yes.
very long
Hmm.
way when it comes to social media. People forget, on social media, somehow with that sort of screen between you, people tend to say things or act in a way that they wouldn't normally. Treat everything like a professional interaction, and I think you really can't go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I also think sometimes on Facebook people can get carried away because they think it's just their friends who are seeing this. So I think just being careful with the settings and making sure that only your friends can see certain things, and even on LinkedIn what you're posting because people are watching. So what other tips do you have besides what we've talked about, Lindsay? Do's and don'ts.
So I think networking is really important, personal branding, doing your homework. And I mentioned it just now a little bit, but I think that sort of following up and closing the loop and showing your gratitude. So I think a lot of people are really good at starting things. So they reach out to somebody or they attend a networking event or they go to an information session and they don't do the next step, which is so essential, which is writing a thank you note to the person who interviewed you, following up with somebody you met at a networking session and saying, I really enjoyed our conversation. I'd love to meet you for a cup of coffee. Or you said that you'd be willing to make an introduction for me. Can I follow up with you on that? So I think making sure that you are the kind of person who follows up is really important. And I think one trick to doing that is whenever you meet someone you admire, ask them for advice. What book do you recommend I read? Or, you're looking at my resume, what suggestions do you have to make it better? And when someone gives you sort of an assignment, you now have a reason to follow up. Oh,
Yeah.
you mentioned that I should read the book Good to Great. I read it and I wanted to thank you for that great suggestion. So simultaneously, you're following up and keeping the relationship, but you're also showing that you're a person who takes advice and you're a person who takes action. So make sure that, you're that person. One example, and it's not perfect, but I'll say at the end of a student event, if anybody wants a free copy of my book, just send me an email. And I'll get like one email out of 100 people. It's like, I just offered you. Maybe they didn't like me or
Yeah.
didn't want the book,
Isn't it
but
amazing? Yeah.
you think that everyone's doing it and nobody's doing it. So remember that everybody in the moment seems great, but the people who actually take action and follow up are the ones who I think really move forward much more quickly than other people. So
Yeah.
follow up is crucial.
And you talk about that in your book, how rare it is for somebody to follow up within 24 hours. So if you do it, you're the exception and you get noticed.
Absolutely. Even with a
Yeah.
job interview, we sort of think that everybody knows you have to send a thank you note after a job interview, but recruiters tell me all the time that they don't receive them. So, even the stuff we consider to be mandatory, it's amazing how many people drop the ball when it comes to things like that.
And it just such a small gesture can go, it goes such a long way.
It's really true.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Lindsey. So anyone who's watching this and they want to follow you or they want to learn more about your work, how can they do that?
Oh, thank you. So my name is a little hard to spell. That's the challenge. But you can find me on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and my own website, lindseypollak.com. It's LindseyPollak, lindseypollak.com. And you can find all of my social networks or send me an email from my site.
So thank you so much. And again, the book, it's Becoming the Boss, and it's available at the Brew Bookstore. So thank you so much, Lindsey. This is awesome.
Thank you. I love Baruch. I love Zicklin. Thanks for having
See you
me.
soon.
Okay.